Yesterday, Sayadaw explained Vedayita Sukha and Avedayita Sukha. Vedayita Sukha is the happiness connecting with pleasant feeling, pleasant sensation. There will be pleasant feeling, pleasant sensation when one comes into contact with desirable objects. When coming into contact with desirable objects, there will be good feeling, good sensation. There are 6 kinds of objects. Objects are the ones where the mind enjoys to be. The mind enjoys to be on the objects, and there are 6 kinds of objects. Among the 6 kinds of objects, the first 5 are more desirable. They are Rupa Ramana, sights to be seen, desirable sights such as beautiful sights or good scenery, beautiful scenery, and so on. They are sights to be seen and called Rupa Ramana. The second one is Sada Ramana, sounds like sweet sound, pleasant sound, music, melody. People enjoy hearing sweet sounds, melody, music, and also the voice of one's lover, and so on. So all these sounds are Sada Ramana. The third one is Gandha Ramana, fragrance, fragrant smell. When one gets fragrant smell, one gets good feeling, good sensation. The fourth one is Rasa Ramana, flavor or taste. When one eats food that has the flavors sweet, sour, spicy, hot, pungent, bitter, and salty, when one gets to eat the kind of flavor one likes, then one has good feeling and one has happiness. And the fifth one is Potapa Ramana, contact, the tangible object. So tangible object can be the touch between inanimate things such as sofa, bed, cool breeze. And when the weather is hot, one feels good to get good breeze, and when it is cold, one likes to have the warm air. And also touch between animate beings, such as touch between human beings, touch with the opposite sex. When one gets such kind of touch, one feels pleasurable. So these 5 objects are called Kama Guna, desirable objects. And beings who relish in sensual objects regard this kind of sensual object as very good and pleasant. Kama means things that are desired, desirable things. So people usually let one's mind go freely on these sensual objects, and these sensual objects tie the person's mind, captivate the person's mind. People who like sensual pleasure, their mind is tied up, captivated, bonded by these sensual objects. For a person who likes beautiful sights, such beautiful sights are tying up, captivating, bonding, attaching the person's mind. And also for the person who likes to get good fragrance, the fragrance is tying up the person's mind. And for the person who likes to think, his or her thoughts and imaginations are tying the person's mind. The person becomes totally absorbed, the person becomes totally drowned in his or her thoughts and imaginations. In this way, these sensual objects tie the person's mind, captivate the person's mind. Guna is defined as bandhana, tying up, binding, so that one cannot be freed. In this way, these sensual objects tie up the person's mind, bind the person's mind, and thus they are called kama guna. So these kama guna are the sensual objects that are desirable. When one comes into contact with the 6 objects, one gains Vedayita Sukha, one gains happiness, connecting with pleasant feeling, coming into contact with these objects. And some are taking pleasure in thinking, imagination, they enjoy thinking and imagining. And other objects, visible objects, sounds, fragrance, taste, and touch are also desirable. And people are enjoying coming into contact with these objects. So when one is enjoying these objects, one feels happy. There is Vedayita Sukha, happiness, connected with pleasant feeling, pleasant sensation, coming into contact with these 6 kinds of objects. Avedayita Sukha is the happiness that has no feeling, no sensation, and it is not connected with coming into contact with 6 kinds of objects. Regarding with the 6 kinds of objects, one is attached on these objects, one craves to see good things, to hear good sounds, to smell fragrance, to taste good flavor, and to touch good touch. In this way, before getting these sense objects, one craves on these objects, and when one gets the things, the desirable things that one wants, then these objects tie up the person, these objects bind the person so that the person cannot escape. So these objects firmly bind, firmly connect the person so that the person cannot escape. At the time one is seeking these objects, the tatna, craving, is not as powerful, and thus it is called dupala tatna, weak craving. So there is Dobala Taṇḍa, weak craving at the time one is seeking for these objects. But after one has got these objects captivate the person's mind. These objects bind the person's mind so that the person cannot part with these objects. So when it gets to this stage, it is Palavā Taṇḍa, strong craving of greater degree. Not only there is Palavā Taṇḍa, greater degree of craving, but there is also wrong view, believing as person or being. One has wrong view that it is I who is seeing, it is I who is hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, knowing. In this way, the person has wrong view, believing as Jiva Atta, individual soul. Before one gets the pleasurable objects, there is craving, there is weak form of craving, and when one gets these objects, one is captivated, one is tied up by these objects, and there will be greater degree of taṇḍa, there will be clinging with craving. And also, believing in Jiva Atta, there will be clinging with wrong view. So, how does these clinging with craving and clinging with wrong view originate? These are originated in not knowing suffering as suffering. And also, one takes suffering as good and pleasant. One takes suffering as happy. Buddha taught that seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, everything is suffering. Not knowing the truth, not knowing suffering as suffering, one thinks seeing is pleasant, hearing is pleasant, smelling is pleasant, and in this way one thinks of them as pleasant and happy. No thinking of these things as pleasant and happy, one craves on these objects, and when one gets these objects, one clings onto them with craving. One cannot give up, one cannot let go, and there will be clinging with craving. So in this way, one clings onto these things with lobha, greed. One clings onto these with wrong view. And these clinging with wrong view, clinging with craving, are originated in not knowing suffering as suffering. Not knowing suffering, one knows wrongly, one takes suffering as happy and pleasant. So one craves onto these objects. So before one practices, there should be ogaha. One should have learning about these things. And if one is not clear, if one does not understand, one should discuss with a teacher. There should be paripuja discussion. One should ask questions to the ones who know. So there should be ogaha, learning, paripuja, discussion. These two, ogaha and paripuja, deals with theory only. Listening to the Dhamma talk, it is ugaha, learning, and in another way it can also be called pripuja, as it is also discussion. Even though the yogis are not putting up questions, but Sayadaw is explaining on things that the yogi may want to ask, and thus Dhamma talks are in the form of ugaha, learning for the yogis, and pripuja, discussion. So one should know the method how one can come to know suffering as suffering, how one can remove the wrong view, taking suffering as happy, and how one should remove the wrong knowing, taking suffering as pleasant, how one can avoid wrong view, how one can remove wrong view. So in this way, there should be savana. One should learn the correct method, and after one has learned the correct method, one should keep in one's mind, one should bear in one's mind. Bearing in one's mind, it is called dharana. So after one has learned the method, after bearing the method in one's mind, one should put it into practice. It is called samasana. Samasana means reflecting or rubbing so that it will be effective. So there should be practice, reflecting. So samasana, one should put it into practice so that one knows it certainly, effectively. In order that one's practice should be effective, one should note the object, aiming the noting mind towards the object, and one should also exert effort so that the noting mind will reach the object of meditation. In this way, noting the object by aiming an effort, the noting mind sticks onto the object, the noting mind hits the target of meditation. When the noting mind hits the target, the object of meditation, then there will not be uncertainty or doubt. If one's noting is not effective, if one's noting mind does not reach the target, the object of meditation, there can be uncertainty and doubt. But when one's noting is effective, when the noting mind hits the target, the object of meditation, then one comes to know clearly. There will not be uncertainty, but one will be certain of the object. So in this way, the noting mind should be direct or face to face with the object. One's noting mind should fall calm and collected on the object. When one's noting mind is face to face or direct with the object, when one's noting mind fall calm and collected on the object, one comes to know the true nature of the object, what it is, how is it, why it is happening. In this way, one develops knowledge stage by stage. It will be Paṭiveda, penetrating the true nature correctly, clearly, in a very clear-cut manner. So yogis should practice diligently in order to gain Paṭiveda, in order to penetrate the truth clearly, precisely. When the yogi develops Vipassana jnana stage by stage, his or her mind will be purified away from the defilement. The mind will be purified when the yogi develop knowledge stage by stage, and finally one's mind will be very purified when one gains Magga Phala Jnana, path and fruition knowledge. When one attains path and fruition knowledge, one gains Avedayita Sukha. One gains the happiness without feeling, without sensation. In other words, there is Sandhi Sukha, the happiness of peace. So one gains Avedayita Sukha, Sandhi Sukha, when one realizes Nibbana by attaining path and fruition knowledge. And such kind of happiness is called Paṇḍitā because it is excellent. Connecting with the sensual object, however the sensual object may be good, pleasant, but after some time the person gets bored with it. But Avedayita Sukha, Sandhi Sukha are the true happiness where one will never be bored with it. Such kind of happiness does not have any feeling. Once the person has attained Nibbana by gaining path and fruition knowledge, one understands Avedayita Sukha from his or her own experience of practice. So what the yogi comes to understand through his or her own experience, it is not like the knowledge gained through reading books. It is not the kind of knowledge one gains from one's teacher. If it is the kind of knowledge gained through reading or through the teachings of the teacher, one may believe it or one may not believe it. But when one realizes, when one attains Avedayita Sukha by realizing Nibbana, one comes to have faith and confidence on the Buddha who guided the way in order to gain such true happiness, and one also have faith and confidence on the method that Buddha had guided in order to reach this level of true happiness, Avedayita Sukha, and one also comes into confirmation, acceptance of the Buddha and also the Dhamma, and one also comes to know that there is also others who practice this way and who also gain genuine happiness. So in this way, by practicing systematically, by practicing according to the teachings, one gains this stage of attaining Avedayita Sukha, the true happiness which has no feeling, by attaining Nibbana. So in this way, one should practice diligently so that one reaches this stage. So what Sayadaw explained is about the 6 kinds of objects. Among these 6 kinds of objects, the first 5 are called Kama Guna, which are the desirable objects that tie up the mind, that binds the mind. So these are the sensual objects. So these sensual objects are called Kama Guna. And they are also called Vattu Kama. Vattu means the the location where the desire takes place. Before one gets these objects, there will be the desire wanting to see, wanting to hear, wanting to smell, wanting to taste, wanting to touch, and so on. And when one gets these objects, sensual objects, one craves unto them, it is tanha, craving. Usually, people who lack mindfulness have craving, tanha, on these objects. There will be lobha, greed. Unwholesome mind arises by lack of mindfulness. Vattu kama are the sensual objects where the craving is located. So these sensual objects are called vattu kama. It is because where these objects are where the craving is located. So in brief, there are two kinds of kama. The first one is vattu kama. Vattu kama means 5 kinds of sensual objects, desirable objects. So these desirable objects are called vattu kama. The second one is the desire which is tanha, craving. They are called, it is called kilesa kama. So in brief, there are two things. The first one is vattu kama, the sensual objects, the desirable objects, the things that are desired. In other way, it is objective sensuousness. The second one is kilesa kama, the desire, which is the defilement. And in other words, it is also called subjective sensuousness. So, in order to get the kama guna, desirable objects, which are vattu kama, the sensual objects, desirable objects, one has to seek these desirable sensual objects. In order to get desirable objects, one has to work for it. One spends much of one's time looking for these sensual objects, desirable objects, and one spends much of one's time trying to get these objects. And things may not arise, things may not happen according to one's wish, and one may lose these objects as well. When one wants to get these sensual objects extremely, one even breaks the law, and then one commits unlawful things that are unruly. So when one commits these wrongdoings, one's body, speech and mind become polluted, dirty, and it leads to suffering. So seeking these sensual objects, one can end up suffering. That's why these sensual objects can create suffering. In order to get these sensual objects, one commits wrongdoing, one commits things that are unlawful, and thus it leads to suffering. And there can be great suffering. So one should see the flaws, the faults of these sensual objects. And Buddha had taught in order to see flaws. If one does not see the flaws, one will crave onto these things, and one does action in order to get them, and there will be more suffering, and the round of existences will be prolonged. When one sees the flaws of sensual objects, one will not be attached, one will not crave onto these things, and thus there will be less suffering. The suffering can be ceased, the sufferings will be ceased, there will be cessation of suffering when one no longer craves. Buddha said that the nama-rupa phenomena which one clings onto with tanha, craving, when one sees these nama-rupa as relishing and good, then tanha, craving, will proliferate. Upadaniya are the nama-rupa phenomena that arises at the sixth sense door, that are clung onto with tanha, craving, and ditthi, wrong view. When one takes these as relishing, then tanha, craving, will increase. So taking things as pleasant, one craves onto it, and one spends much of one's time in craving, in lying, going, sitting, in every posture, one wastes one time with craving. If one, before one gets these sensual objects, desirable objects, one craves onto these objects. After getting these objects, one clings onto them with tanha, craving, one clings onto them with ditthi, wrong view, and one commits bodily action, verbal action, mental action in order to gain these sensual objects. Upadana paccaya bhava, meaning the clinging originates more deeds that lead to rebirth, and thus the round of existences will be prolonged. So one should be mindful of these physical and mental phenomena which are called upadaniya, clung onto objects. One should be mindful by practicing satipatthana. One should note the object of meditation by aim and effort. When mindfulness is sustained, the mind will fall calm and collected on the object. When there is sustained mindfulness, when the mind falls calm and collected on the object of meditation, tanha, craving, has no chance to arise. By noting the object, when one gains knowledge, gaining knowledge, one dispels not knowing. Knowing correctly, it will be anupasi, knowing that things arise and pass away, and thus they are impermanent, because things always constantly arising and passing away, it is suffering, and things are arising in their own accord. In this way, one understands that the physical and mental phenomena that are arising at the sixth sense door are impermanent, suffering, and non-self. So seeing, understanding the nama-rupa correctly as cause and effect, and the characteristic of impermanent, suffering, and non-self, one sees the flaws of the physical and mental phenomena. Seeing the flaws, seeing the faults, one will no longer crave onto these objects. So seeing correctly, seeing the flaws, seeing the faults, one will no longer think of it as pleasant or good. One sees suffering as suffering. Seeing suffering as suffering, there will not be tanha, craving. When there is no craving, there will not be clinging. So in this way, knowing correctly, one also removes the wrong view of jiva atta. One will no longer take it as being or soul. So in this way, knowing correctly, one sees suffering as suffering. One will no longer crave. There will not be minor kind of craving, or there will not be greater degree of craving. In this way, discerning mind and matter, craving is removed, ditthi, wrong view, is removed. When it is said that tanha, craving is removed, it means tanha, craving has no chance to arise, and thus one will no longer cling with tanha, and one will no longer cling with wrong view. Removing tanha, craving, clinging will not arise, and thus one defilements come to a cessation. One will no longer commit deeds that lead to further assistance. In this way, the round of defilements, the round of deeds, the round of resultants come to a cessation. The 3 rounds will be stopped, and Saraji will continue to explain tomorrow. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.